Hello, welcome. Thank you very much for joining us. I can see we've got some early people just coming in now. I can see they're just totting up as everybody's sort of let in. And thanks very much for joining us on this Safety Solutions webinar that we're running this evening to look at risk assessments, incident reporting, first aid provision, and insurance. So we've got a variety of solutions there. So welcome to you all. We're still a bit ahead of time, so people will join us. I'm just going to make sure you're all comfortable before we get going. And one of the things that we will be utilizing this evening is the chat function. And we want you to be active in there. Let us know your thoughts. Let us know your questions. But make sure you set it to all panelists and attendees. So everybody, if you can do that, all panelists and attendees, just to make sure everybody's involved in the conversation. And we will be answering questions in that. Our panelists will be active in there as well. So good to see you all. Now, people should be able to hear me now. And obviously, if they can't hear me, they can't hear me. But hopefully they can read the screen. And if you do need support, put something into the chat. So if they can't hear me, they can't hear me. But hopefully they can read. Get yourself comfortable. We're just before 7, just when we're due to start. So we will get going in just a moment. But that chat function, I generally put it down the right hand side, but find what's suitable for you. If you're using different devices, then it will come up in different ways. If you're struggling in one device, it's not working, you can always try on another device. It will work on your phone as well. Obviously not quite as good, but use those different devices. One of the things that we will be utilizing this evening is Transcript. But if it does annoy you, it does become quite distracting, you can turn it off. And if you see that transcript button, you'll be able to go on to that and just press hide and it will take it away for you. So this final bit of housekeeping, because it's 7 o'clock and I can see people have joined us this evening. I'm just going to go through the final housekeeping before we get going. So any technical problems, let us know in the chat. We've got Ian Renard, club developer extraordinaire in the background, so he'll be able to support you. If it's doesn't work too much, it's getting too much, you can always, log out and log back in again. We'll let you back in there. If you've got any questions, then please use that chat function and just put them in there and we'll do our best to answer those. There will be a Q&A at the end. We are recording this, so you'll get a recording of it afterwards in the follow-up, and you can share it with other people from your club. And end time, we will make sure, without a doubt, that we will finish by 8 o'clock at the very latest. But thank you very much for joining us on this session. So let's get kicked off. We're 1 minute past 7 on this Safety Solutions webinar, where we're going to have a look at solutions for your risk assessments, incident reporting, first aid provision, and insurance there. And I have to do a big thanks to our insurance provider, the RSA, who have given us a risk bursary, which has helped us fund many of this, not all of it, but many of the solutions that we're sharing with you. And these things we've sort of developed, hopefully to help to make sure that we give and make our rugby clubs a safe place to be. Safety Solutions. So who have we got? Well, we've got a great panel for you this evening. We've got Dom Taylor from Proactive Reporting, and he'll be talking about, an app that you can utilize in your club. And some of you might have been using it already for the COVID symptoms checker. So you've got in there as well, incident reporting, hazard reporting. You'll hear more from Dom and the offer that we've got there, a great offer for you to take up there. We've got Andy Goldburn from our insurance broker, Howden, who will be talking through a free risk assessment online tool there, linked with all the insurance, and, linked in with a first aid risk assessment as well. He's just said hello in the chat there. Jamie Goddard, we've got from Didcot Rugby Club, as well as from Oxfordshire Rugby Football Union, who, has utilised a lot of things around Rugby Safe and has been trying out the proactive reporting system generally, just recently, and we'll be telling you how he sort of found it. Rachel Faull-Brown, so you can see we've got a lot of people on here. Rachel is our player welfare manager, and so Rugby Safe is sort of her bag, and she'll be talking around all things Rugby Safe and all the things there. And in the background, Ian Renard, club developer, extraordinaire, who will be our producer, making sure it all runs accordingly, and we'll be hosting a Q&A at the end. And so please, let us know your thoughts in the chat function. Just make sure it's set to all panelists and attendees so everyone can enjoy and join in the chat that is going on there. So why, safety solutions? Well, safety, quite simply, is there, because we want to make sure that we offer a really good, enjoyable environment for people to play rugby in. And if we're going to enjoy ourselves, then we've got to feel safe as a sort of starting point. And so we want to make sure that we offer that. And that's not just on the field, that's off the field. Rugby clubs are a fantastic place to be, lots of great times. But if it's not a safe environment, then, it's not a place that you really want to spend loads of time in. So, that is the key reason why we want to offer safety, because we want, when we can do, to have full clubhouses, and we want people to be enjoying rugby as our sort of starting point. And rugby clubs, we do have to manage a lot of hazards that are out there. We can see on the cartoon here some variety of hazards that we might get at a rugby club. And we've got better and better at this. Certainly risk assessments have gone right up the agenda massively because of COVID. So we've all got used to doing risk assessments around COVID and all the changing things that are happening there. And certainly that has become the norm these days. But it, goes wider than that. First aid risk assessments, as well as risk assessments of your clubhouse, etc., and your activities. So we're now going to have a look at a poll. And I'm going to hand over to Ian Renard to launch this poll for you.
Okay then, guys, I'm going to just launch this first poll for you. So what do you think is the most claimed for category on the RFU Club Public Liability Insurance? Is it damage to property? Is it the off-field slips, trips and falls? Is it on-field injuries to players? Or is it safeguarding issues? Get those votes in now. A few of you have voted. Be good to get those votes coming in. I see they're going up now. That's good. Have a little think. Get the vote in quick. I'm going to hold it open for another 5 seconds. Last few coming in now. Make your decision quick as I end the poll now. I'm going to share those results with you. And you'll see there that 76% off-field slips, trips and falls. And I shall hand back to Alex.
And you are absolutely correct. The 76% that said that, basically, our most claimed for category on our RFU club liability insurance is the off-field slips, trips and falls. And if you have the great task of actually going through our insurance claims, you will see these slips, trips and falls claims. And what is so noticeable with them is most of them, or a lot of them, are actually avoidable. If someone just looked out for that hazard that is there, and certainly, just looking out for that hazard could have prevented certain people getting injured in a certain way. And so that's one of the key reasons why we want to obviously put these safety solutions in, to stop people getting injured and stop these ones that are avoidable. Not everything's avoidable, but stop some of these ones that are avoidable actually happening in the first place. So, for rugby clubs, there's also, why do we need to be interested in this? Well, we have the legal bit that we need to do. And it starts with a duty of care, which is, it applies to all individuals and organisations. And it's regardless of the size of the organisation. It's there as well to avoid carelessly causing injury to persons. So even if you're totally volunteer run, there is a legal duty of care that you're not carelessly causing injury to persons. And obviously as well, there's the health and safety legislation, the main one being the Health and Safety at Work Act. So if you're starting to employ people, then of course the Health and Safety at Work Act, which is the sort of main legislation around this area, that one comes in as well. But we do need to, note that there is a legal responsibility for our clubs to do this. And then we have RFU regulations, and particularly Regulation 9 around player safety. And I'm sure you've all read this and know the detail in and out. But certainly 9.3 is a key one, and the one we will sort of be talking about this evening. And that one says all clubs and those involved in arranging any rugby activity must ensure that there is an appropriate level of immediate care and/or first aid cover and equipment provided for that rugby activity as determined by a first aid risk assessment. And the good news is tonight we'll share with you that we have a solution there. I know Ian's just put into the chat, so if you wanted to have a look at that, clearly RFU regulation around that. And Rachel as well will be sharing with you some stuff around Rugby Safe as well to support in this first aid provision. And also just a little task that, you know, you're free to go and do while you're sort of listening to me now. But, you know, society has changed. So if you went onto Google now and you put in rugby injury claim and you see all the different potential solicitors that will be willing to take your case, and it will clearly show you what society we live in these days, where people will go after, you know, these injuries that are there. So it's worth doing. Do it now if onto just while you're listening to me. But that Google sort of rugby injury claimant, just to show you what sort of society we live in, that people will go after that. And the final thing before I hand over to the main people and the main event people tonight is, you know, one of the things that comes out of our player surveys quite all the time is fear of injury, you know, is one of the key reasons why people don't play rugby. So hence why, you know, we've got to try and provide that safe environment, the bit where you'll be able to get first aid, to make sure people feel safe, because try and make sure people feel as comfortable and as safe as possible, so we don't have this fear of injury from our rugby clubs. I'll pass you over to Ian before we head over to some other people to listen to them.
Okay, so I'm just going to launch this next poll now. Does your club complete an annual risk assessment? Yes, no, or you don't know? Get those votes in. Lovely. Flying in now. Brilliant. Just last few to come in. And I'm going to end that polling there and share those results with you. And you'll see that the good news is that 62%, yes, you do an annual risk assessment, which is great. Some don't know, which is fair enough. And a small minority, no. I'm going to hand you over to Andy now, who's going to take you through the next part of the session.
Thanks, Ian, and thanks for having us along today. And it's good to talk to you all about this. It's really good to see that, you know, 60% of the clubs are doing risk assessments, and we'll come on to the reason why that's important and how we're kind of here to help with that in a moment. I'm from Howden Insurance Brokers, and hopefully you're aware of what we do for the RFU and for the clubs. But just to go back over that for your information, we've been brokers to the RFU for just over 5 years now. And what we do is, our job is to arrange the insurance that's put in place for all of the RFU clubs, coaches, officials and players, to essentially to protect you if the worst happens, on the basis of the examples that Alex has given before. So if somebody is injured at the club and they do look to sue the club or the club committee members or the coach or a referee, or if you have a player who suffers a catastrophic injury, a broken neck, broken back, something like that, a head injury, and needs to claim a personal accident benefit, we're the people who put in place that insurance that provides that protection for you. We've created an online website called at englandrugbyinsurance.co.uk, and I'd suggest, if you haven't seen that, go have a look. We're currently updating it, and there's going to be a brand new version launched very shortly, but on there you'll find all the information about all of the insurance that we put in place to help protect the clubs and the people who are associated with the clubs, and playing, and all the players, etc. Now, just moving back to risk assessments specifically, and the question really is how do risk assessments help you as a club? And Alex has touched already on various different bits and pieces around the duty of care that you have as a club to create a safe environment. A safe club is often a welcoming club. Or the opposite is very much true. A club where people are being injured all the time isn't necessarily going to be a club that people want to be associated with. And if you can help to keep people safe, people who are coming to the club, players, visitors, families, etc., then that means that ultimately you stop people getting injured. And if you're stopping people being injured, then that is clearly a very, very good thing. And risk assessments do a great job in helping you to identify those areas where people are going to be injured and taking those, what are quite often very small, simple steps to actually stop those injuries happening. One of the most costly and most damaging injuries and claims that I've seen in my career working with sports clubs was a payment of about £500,000 that came as a result of somebody tripping over a gym bag. And it was the simplest thing in the world. There was racking in the room for bags to be stored away. The club had done everything that they could do to try and manage it. But the coach put his bag down on the floor and somebody fell over it, and it resulted in quite a serious injury to somebody and a very, very costly claim. And it was a really simple thing. When we took over working with the RFU a few years ago, one of the things that we did was quite a big analysis of the claims that are made against clubs. And in the 7 or 8 years before we were involved with dealing with the club's insurance, there was about £300,000 worth of compensation paid to people who slipped in the bar area of a club. And this was all very, very simple claims. These were people who were just slipping on spilt beer, which is a simple thing to happen. But those clubs were having to be settled by the insurers and money paid out to people for compensation. Now, sometimes that's warranted and that's relevant, but one of the most annoying things that we come across an awful lot when dealing with clubs, and one of the things that will really, really wind clubs up, is when somebody injures themselves, because accidents do happen and you can't avoid that completely. But when somebody does injure themselves and compensation has to be paid to that person, despite the club knowing that they've done everything they possibly could do to keep people safe. And the reason why those claims end up having to be settled is generally because there's a lack of documentation around what has been done to manage the risk. And that starts from the risk assessment, really. So if you've got a written risk assessment, one, as I say, it's going to focus people's attention on making sure that the club is safe and removing the very basic hazards that are going to cause injury to people, which is fundamentally the best thing. But when people do slip and trip and fall, as we know they do, if you've got documented risk assessments, if you've got documented maintenance plans, and you've identified different areas and what you're doing to fix them, that can go a long way towards helping the insurers defend the claim. And as well as saving money, that saves you management time, it saves you hassle and stress and conflict and everything else that goes along with being sued, which is where these things can all end up. And the example that's just on screen at the moment with a pothole in a car park, we had two very, very similar claims around this, where somebody tripped in a car park and in a pothole and tried to sue the club for compensation. One was paid at £15,000. On the other one, we were able to successfully defend it because they had documentation. And going back to Alex's image that I love of the stormtroopers chasing down the ambulance chasing solicitors, for them, it's very much a numbers game. They don't get paid an awful lot in the fixed fees to deal with these claims against your club, but they make allegations on the basis that you're not managing the risk appropriately. If we can send them some documentation to say, look, actually, this club is doing a good job. They're taking reasonable steps. You don't have to go over the top, but we're taking reasonable steps to manage this risk. 90% of those claims will go away with some documentation because it doesn't pay the solicitors to fight them. So there's a lot of reasons really why having written risk assessments and going down that process can be a very good thing for you. Now, to help you with this, what we've been working with the RFU on, with the insurers as well, is in the creation of what we call our online risk assessment tool. The idea behind this, to a large extent, and this comes back to the idea again that there's 60% of the clubs that we've got here tonight are doing risk assessments, which is really good, but there's a decent proportion of clubs that aren't, and our experience of dealing with clubs and claims being made against clubs on a much wider basis would suggest that it's quite a lot less than 60% of clubs that are doing it on a regular basis. There's a number of reasons for this, and one of the main ones tends to be clubs have a good understanding of what they're required to do. People who are running clubs know that they need to manage risk. They know that they need to be taking steps to do things like this, but they don't really know where to start. And starting with a blank sheet of paper to do a risk assessment can be a really, really difficult thing. Quite often as well, it's a volunteer who's being asked to do the risk assessment. They're very often not health and safety trained. They don't have risk management experience. And there's an element of, there can be quite an element of fear that goes along with this as well, on the basis of, if I get it wrong, am I going to be held responsible? I don't know where to start. How do I know that I'm thinking about the things that I need to be considering? The other element as well is that the risks that you need to manage at a rugby club are quite often similar from one club to the next. And the steps that you need to be doing and putting in place in order to manage those risks, again, are very similar from one club to the next. So what we've done in the risk assessment tool, which is going to be launched very, very soon, is collate a lot of those risks and a lot of those risk management techniques, those mitigating actions together into a series of very simple multiple choice questions. And the idea behind this is it will take you through various different aspects of what you need to be thinking about your club and helping you to assess whether you have the right steps in place to manage your risk, or also, if not, identifying areas where you might want to give a little bit more attention to, and some of the things that you need to do in order to help do that. Going back to what Alex was saying again about Regulation 9 as well, that is now going to form part of this online risk assessment. So as well as assessing what you can do to try and prevent fires and electrical fires, for example, at your clubhouse, what you can do to try and prevent people falling and slips and trips. There's also an assessment that we've worked on with Rachel and with the RFU built into this to try and help you do that assessment of what your appropriate first aid provision should be and how you go about doing that. Now, once you've completed the risk assessment, once you've been through the multiple choice questions that are within this, it generates what we call our risk assessment and action plan. And this records all of the answers that you've given as part of what you've done. It breaks it down into different areas. So we've got outside facilities, we've got clubs, policies and procedures, we've got inside clubs, we've got the first aid, etc. And as you go through this, Alex, if you can just move on to the next slide, which is a bit more of a close-up, you'll see with this, it's identifying the area where the risk is. So in this case, it's about whether you use PPE when you're doing grounds maintenance, etc. And then from a risk assessment point of view, if you are doing this, it'll identify that you're doing it, and it's got a statement there to recognise how you're managing the risk. You'll see if you say no, if this isn't something that you're doing, it will make suggestions as to what we suggest that you think you should be doing and other ways that you can manage this risk. And throughout the whole thing, there are also loads of really helpful links to outside information, HSE, to the RFU guidance on Rugby Safe and head case and different things like that, just to help you, give you different areas to go to give you ideas as to what you need to be doing to manage these risks and the bits that you need to be looking at. The other important thing to mention on this as well is it's not designed to catch anybody out. Saying no to questions as you're completing the risk assessment isn't going to invalidate anybody's insurance at all. There are lots of clubs, as we've seen, who are very, very good at their risk management. And we're not asking anybody who's got a risk management policy and procedure and lots of risk assessments in place at the moment to dumb it down at all. There's a facility within this that if you're actually doing your own risk assessments at the moment and you're comfortable with your own system, carry on doing that and upload that, send that to us on the back of this system. You don't have to go through the detail. What we're trying to do with this is take those clubs who aren't doing any health and safety, aren't managing their risks at all, aren't doing any risk assessments, and importantly, those clubs who know they need to but don't know where to start. It's designed to help get those to a minimum standard, so that they're doing something which is going to help manage the risk and help prevent the injuries, but also that it's documented and it's recorded, so we've got something we can follow up with if we need to help you if somebody just wants to make a claim against the club. And Ian, I think we're going back over to you for another poll now, aren't we?
We are indeed. So another poll, guys. I'm just going to launch that now for you. So does your club have a first aid risk assessment? That poll's being launched there. Get your votes in. Yes, no, don't know. Great. Good to see all your votes coming in there. Nice and quick. Give you a few more seconds for a few of you to get those last votes in. Yes, no, or don't know. Does your club have a first aid risk assessment? You might not know. That's fine. I'm going to end that poll in now. I'm going to share those results with you. And as you can see there, a large number of you, 62%, you do have a club first aid risk assessment, which is great. A minority with no, and some of you don't know, so maybe something to pose a question to someone in your club who may know. I'll stop sharing those results and hand over to Rachel.
Thanks, Ian, and thanks, Andy, as well, for the tee up to this as well. So I'm going to just kind of follow on from Andy there and go into a bit more detail about some of the components and considerations that sit under the Rugby Safe umbrella and should really be considered as part of that risk assessment and are in that template that we've worked together to develop. And a lot of this is kind of really about good practice in terms of responsibilities, the club's responsibilities around provision and preparation for playing and holding events, etc., and matches. So along with that annual risk assessment, that main annual risk assessment, individuals should be kind of undertaking what we call kind of live risk assessments, or just a simple session checklist before each match or session. This doesn't need to be a big job. It's basically just checking things like, having a quick check of the pitch, checking the equipment, checking if any players have got injuries or anything you need to be aware of. So just that, quick sort of 5-minute before a session, and not necessarily want to answer in the chat, but just thinking to yourself, do you do that if you're a coach, or do you know that your coaches are doing that in your club at the moment? So that's one thing to consider. The other bit is around player information as well. So are you collecting the appropriate information for players around their what medical information they've got? Again, this doesn't need to be extensive, and it's mainly just conditions that might be affected by participating in rugby, so things like asthma, epilepsy. And it's just important to remember that these records should be stored safely and securely, and then only shared with consent as appropriate. And then the final point on that first one is around injury reporting. Now, I'm not going to go into too much detail on this one because I'll leave that to Dom later, and he could obviously talk about the new app that's coming out. But what I will say is that clubs should really have some form of injury and incident reporting system in place. And again, that needs to be appropriate in terms of security and things like that. So it's just to kind of make sure that that process is in place. The other thing to consider is that, and you may or may not be aware of, is that we have what we call RFU injury reportable events. And there's a threshold at which we ask that if there's an incident or injury that meets that threshold, it's reported to the RFU. And that threshold is if the player is admitted to hospital. And what we mean by that is actually admitted and stays in hospital, doesn't visit A&E and leaves, it's an admission to hospital. If the incident or injury involves sports goggles or is on an ADP pitch, or thankfully, which is a rare case, if someone dies within 6 hours of playing rugby. So moving on to the next sort of bit there, that there's that ambulance picture there, and that's a prime example, I think, of potentially some clubs on a Saturday or a Sunday where people have just dumped their cars because they needed to get in and get changed or whatever, and then should an ambulance need to be called, it can't access the venue. So that medical emergency action plan is really important in terms of having something in place. Now, again, this only really needs to be reviewed alongside that risk assessment, so on an annual basis, or if your circumstances change, i.e., you've got new facilities or there's a new car park layout or something like that. It should be a simple document, so it shouldn't be something that's a massively onerous task, but it just sets out a process of what happens and who does what in the event of a medical emergency. And the important thing with this is that it's shared with relevant individuals, i.e. coaches, etc. It's no good being stored at the back of a filing cabinet in an office or something. It needs to be something that's live and relevant. So the next one that's popped up there is first aid and immediate care provision. Now, in terms of this, we have actually recently reviewed the current guidelines, and we've taken an evidence-based approach looking at what we know about injuries and how the game's played at different levels of the game. I'd love to be able to share them with you at the moment, but they are in the final stages of sign-off. Before, I don't want to jump the gun, but the intention is that they will be published in June in readiness for next season. One thing I can say before people sort of start panicking and worrying that we're going to put something out there before next season is that actually the actual provision guide, the provision that's set out there, i.e. how many first aiders are needed for a team at different levels of the game across the age grade, it hasn't significantly changed from the current guidelines. So if you're already meeting those current guidelines or already you've got them in place, actually you're not going to have major changes needed for next season. What we have looked to do within those new guidelines is kind of what we're going through tonight, really, is providing more guidance and information about some of the wider elements of that provision and what good practice looks like as well within the club and those responsibilities that a club has to make sure that that provision's in place. So one of the things that clubs need to consider is ensuring that, it's great having that first aid provision in place, but it's making sure that those first aiders are appropriately trained and qualified. So based on those guidelines, in the majority of cases for clubs at level 5 and below, this basically means having first aid appointed people qualified to a level 3 first aid qualification. And we obviously encourage people to do our emergency first aid in rugby union course. However, just to point out, and I want to stress this, that clubs can run other level 3 courses. They don't have to do our first aid course. And that individuals can bring in their qualifications from outside of rugby. So, for example, if someone's a teacher or a police officer or something like that, as in their day job, and they've got a level 3 first aid qualification, they can bring that qualification and it's relevant and transfer it into the rugby environment. So I'm not going to go into too much detail tonight and further about the qualifications, but as I mentioned, there will be more information about what those appropriate qualifications look like, and if you are looking to run a course that isn't our course in your club, what considerations you need to have and other things like that. That's all in that new guidelines document that'll be available next month. Now we're in May, aren't we? So in addition to that provision and training, you also need to have a think about what equipment and facilities need to be in place. So there's the obvious sort of first aid kits and having a first aid kit pitch side with every first aider, but clubs may want to also consider what additional equipment and facilities may be required. So this might be like an AED, a defib, or having a specifically assigned medical room. In most cases, this will be asserted based on the size of the club, how many teams you've got, your size of the age grade teams, etc. And this should be really asserted through that risk assessment process as well. The final one I'm going to flag up tonight is the head case resources. So clubs should be asking coaches, players to complete their the online learning module if they haven't already done it as part of some training, and kind of as part of that, then the important process, the follow-on to that, is making sure that coaches and players and parents as well are also then adhering to and following the appropriate return to play programme. So there's no point in doing the training if you don't then look to embed those guidelines and that best practice from a head case and concussion point of view, suspected concussion point of view in your club. So it's really important that people are aware of, if there is a suspected concussion, right, what do we need to do with that individual? How long do they need to sit out for, etc. So that's a bit of a whistle-stop tour. Most of this information, or all of this information, is available on the Rugby Safe pages on englandrugby.com. One thing I will flag up as a bit of a heads up, we are currently updating a lot of the information. As I said, we're obviously been working on the provision guidelines, and we're giving most of the resources a bit of a lick of paint ready for next season. So it's a case of watch this space and keep a lookout for those as we lead into next season. So at that point, I'm going to, as I say, a bit of a whistle-stop tour from me. I'm going to hand over to Jamie, who probably more importantly than me going through them is going to kind of help bring some of this to life. Jamie's the CB Rugby Safe lead for Oxfordshire and the Rugby Safe lead at his club at Didcot. So Jamie, over to you really about how you've brought, some of the things I've mentioned tonight and Rugby Safe to life.
Brilliant. Thank you, Rachel. As Rachel said, so within Oxfordshire, I'm the Rugby Safe lead for Oxfordshire CB and also for Didcot Rugby Club. We're based in South Oxfordshire. We're a small to medium sized club. We've got about 250 minis and juniors. We've got 2 senior men's teams. We've got a women's team as well, and a growing girls section as well for under 13s and under 15s as well. As a club, when I started coaching and volunteering at the club about 4 or 5 years ago now, there was basics in place, you could say. And a lot of the time that I find when you go to a club to volunteer, you're generally sat on the side of a pitch watching one of your children enjoy playing rugby, and then you gradually get more and more involved. Quite quickly, from a CB point of view, because of my background within the emergency services, I was asked if I would be interested in assisting the county with first aid provision and the safety side of things for clubs. As we all know, that's sort of morphed into what we now refer to as Rugby Safe. From a club point of view, we made sure that we had our first aid risk assessments carried out. I did that alongside other people within the club because they also need to understand and appreciate why we need to have that in place. I now work in a health and safety background away from the emergency services. So I have a good baseline of knowledge of what is required. It wouldn't be fair for me at a club level to take everything over. Everybody needs to understand why we have to have that in place. So first aid risk assessment was one of the things that we did, recognise that the provision of equipment wasn't up to scratch. So we improved that standard at the club. And then we also improved the training side of things. We carried out the emergency first aid in rugby union. I'm also one of the tutors for the RFU for that course. So it was quite easy for us to organise that and implement that at a club level. Making sure that also, as Rachel said, that we had the additional equipment in place. As a club, we purchased a defibrillator that was available to us. We are on a shared sports ground, so our medical emergency action plan, that was shared with the local football team and cricket club that is also associated within the same facility. The facility that we have at our club, it is a private facility known as Boundary Park, so it's having clear lines of communication in place. So if we've got a busy Sunday morning, for example, where we've got minis and juniors running, the rugby club of the cricket club have also got a match on, and the local football club have got a couple of matches on, our parking areas can become very, very busy, and the local area can become very busy very quickly. So it's making sure that all in all, we're all working together to make sure that access for the emergency service is still there, and that the medical emergency action plan for the football club, which is what the FA also have in place, essentially is mirrored for the RFU one, and the same with the rugby club. So the first aid provision was something that we vastly improved on very, very quickly within the club, making sure that everybody was aware of what we needed and the training was there. When it comes to head case, that was also something that we highlighted was needed at a club level and also at a county level. What we're trying to implement is that as soon as any children start going to secondary school, where they're amount of rugby that they could be playing during any week because of sports that they're carrying out of school, especially contact sports, that they're aware of concussion. And because the provision that we have within the RFU of head case and the courses that we've got, at Didcot Rugby Club, we really encourage our individual players from the under 12s, under 13s and up to carry out the players' head case training. We've also put invitations out there to make parents and guardians aware of the online training for them. As a club, every single coach carries out the head case training as we see is required. And we make sure that that is regularly updated as well. So at this point in time, we say a maximum of every 2 years. We're going to move that to every season that a coach will carry out the head case trainings, just so they're keeping up to date with their training, and it's up to date on the GMS system as well. From a county point of view, that's also something that we're working on to as a CB, that we're getting out there to all the clubs within the county to make sure that they're aware of the importance of getting the message of head case and concussion and head injuries. And then obviously with the changes to Regulation 9 that are coming up, we're going to be pre-planning, ready for the input that's going to be coming from that, and how we're going to be advising clubs across the county how they need to be improving. When it comes to, again, I'll discuss when Dom's had his go at discussing about the proactive application that's available. Injury reporting is something that is very time consuming, especially when you're trying to communicate with coaches across the club, and also from a county point of view across all clubs within the county, and how those injuries are being reported. And then it's getting the paperwork in, so where an accident report form has been filled out at club level, making sure that as the Rugby Safe lead, I've got that, and then that's being kept secure. So we're making sure that that's available if there are any comebacks from the issues that we've been faced with that injury, for example. And then also making sure that all the coaches are aware of how to keep their equipment up to date. Within Didcot Rugby Club, what we've basically done is we've given them a little checklist within their first aid kit, so they're aware of what should be in there. We've got 2 larger kits that we put into a central location, so if there is ever an incident at the club where their small first aid kit within their kit bag isn't sufficient, or they need more dressings, for example, or additional equipment, that's readily available in the larger first aid kits. Within those larger first aid kits, we've also got a checklist to make sure that everything's up to date and in date within those kits as well. So it's essentially making sure that at clubs we've got the cooperation in place within the coaching team, essentially making sure that the whole club is working efficiently to ensure that the first aid provision's in place. When it comes to risk assessments, as a club, we initially did those ourselves. We have taken advantage of the Howden platform and the risk assessments that are available on there as well. We've uploaded our club risk assessments onto that system, and we've also communicated that out, so they're readily available for any coach to look at. It's making sure that as a club, we're aware that we've got that duty of care for anybody that's visiting the club as well, whether that's parents, guardians, the players themselves, or whether that's visiting teams coming in. So making sure that everything's covered when it comes to that. So again, very much like Rachel said, it's very much a whistle tour of what we've put in place at Didcot Rugby Club, and also really at a county. And one thing I will say to finish off is it's an ever evolving thing. I try to make sure that nobody's really scared of doing risk assessments. Within the county, I've offered my assistance to all clubs to say, look, if there's something you're struggling with, essentially give me a shout, I can help out. But within the risk assessments, is making sure that people are aware that they need to check for those foreseeable risks. What are we looking at? If we're looking at something and going, harm could come from that hazard, we need to put that in our risk assessment. And it's basically using our common sense, not to be scared of health and safety and those risk assessments, and making sure that we're putting as much down as we possibly can that is coming to our minds as we think needs to be in them. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, so thank you very much, Jamie. Good stuff. Some great things going on. We're going to go to a poll now. So I'm going to launch this poll, and we're going to look at what system does your club have in place for incident reporting? So do you have an incident report book? Do you use an app? If you do, just pop in the chat, what system do you use? Don't know. Or if there's anything else out there. And if it is anything else, pop that into the chat. We'd love to know that. That'd be good to know. Get those votes coming in. Really good. Just waiting on those last few votes to come in. I'll give you a few more seconds. Great. I'm going to end that polling now. I'm going to share those results with you. And you'll see there that 57% of you have an incident report book. Yeah, that's interesting. Don't know. Yeah, that's fair. Some of you got other. I can see that some of you are popping some things into the chat now. You've got some forms, different types of accident report form. That's great to know. Right, thank you for that. I'm going to stop sharing those results now. We're going to go straight into another poll, which you'll see on your screen there. I'm just going to launch that poll now. So how does your club report hazards? Do you contact your club officer? Do you wait for the next committee meeting? Is the officers of the club's responsibility? You don't know, or other? And if it is other and you're happy to share, drop it in the chat for us. That'd be great to know. I'll just give you a few more seconds. Lovely to see those votes coming in. Interesting mix. I will now end that polling. Thanks for those that have voted. I'm going to share those results with you now. And you'll see most of you contact your club officer. There's some that just say it's the officers of the club's responsibility, and some of you wait for the next committee meeting, and equally a fair few of you who don't know, which is fine. Maybe a good one to find out. I'm going to stop sharing those results, and I'm going to hand you over to Dom from Proactive.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you, Ian, for having me along and the team. Just an introduction really to Proactive. Some of you I know on the call are already familiar with the Proactive system and what we've been doing over the last almost a year now with the RFU. Proactive has come from a sporting background. My company is a coaching company that delivers kids' activities across the country to about 200 camps every year. And we have similar issues to many clubs in as much as incident reporting, hazard spotting is very fragmented and difficult to control and understand. So we've designed Proactive, which is designed to help and improve that area. Within the last sort of 9 months, Proactive has been working with the RFU on the COVID-19 checker. That was an idea that we had very early on when the government guidance came out to help clubs basically do self-assessment prior to training. And it has really taken off over the last sort of 6 months, as you can imagine. It's been used over 300,000 times by clubs, by participants and coaches, now adopted by 700 clubs across the country from various sports, including over 200 rugby clubs, which is great. And this evening, really, I'm here to introduce what we've been doing with the RFU for the last few months, which is to widen the scope of Proactive availability for rugby clubs and make it more user-friendly and more widespread for you guys going forwards. So if we can just move on to the next slide. So we're rolling out Proactive, the full system, available to clubs from tomorrow. The system has been designed with rugby in mind. It's been adapted based on the questions that are required for rugby. It relates to head case, it relates to rugby-based injuries as well as rugby-based hazards. We're releasing instant reporting, dynamic risk assessment, pre-session checks, the COVID-19 checker, and also direct links to the Rugby Safe resources through the Proactive app. If you just move on, the incident reporting, this will be aligned to the RFU requirements. So what this allows you to do is basically ditch those accident report books that a lot of you have got and move it all onto an online system. And the instant reports allows you to report accidents, emergencies and near misses. And it's very straightforward. It's designed from the coach's perspective. It's designed to be as simple as possible. It talks them through the process. It allows them to fill in detail as they move along very quickly on a mobile device. The dynamic risk assessment, that's a bit of a hot topic at the moment. This is really your ongoing risk assessment. Many of you will realise that risk assessments are often written once a year. They're then put away and not looked at very frequently throughout the year. The dynamic risk assessment on Proactive allows coaches to basically spot those hazards around the club as they happen and to report them easily into club staff. So where we saw earlier about people waiting till the next committee meeting or reporting them to the club officer, this allows your staff to report in really quickly and easily using the Proactive system. The Proactive system allows you to have a dashboard for your key staff to view, so your safeguarding officer or your club committee to view, so you can have a real good oversight of what is happening within your club in relation to incidents and hazards. The pre-session check is probably one that the coaches will really like. It's a 2-minute simple check. It's those areas that Rachel was talking about earlier, where your coach walks onto pitch side, they're up against it, they might be a little bit late, they need to do their health and safety checks, but they don't know what to look for or how to record it. So this is really simple pre-session check. It's 2 minutes. They open it up, they fill in, they can add any notes if there's any problems that they've identified, and then they're safe to go. The COVID checker, for many of you, this has been a part of your return to play over the last sort of 6 months. Really simple symptom checker, restriction checker that allows you to see instantly that your participants are safe to return to rugby. And then the direct link to resources for Rugby Safe. So what we've done on Proactive, we've added a button that allows you to click on, which says resources on it, and it allows you to instantly access those Rugby Safe resources rather than having to search for them or look elsewhere for them online. So you can click on them and you can get them via download to instantly see what you should be doing if there's a head injury, etc., or whether it's a reportable injury, how to complete a report form for that as well. So we're really excited. Obviously, we work really hard with Proactive to make this really rugby specific and rugby focused. What we're offering out is a Proactive full club account. So that gives you 60 licenses. So that should cover most of your coaches and key staff. If you needed any more, you just contact us and we'd let you have those as well. We're not precious about the 60 number. It gives you a central dashboard for reporting incidents, for the hazard reporting, for pre-session checks, all of those things. But it also gives individual dashboards for your club staff. So for example, if your coach is leading the under-9s, they might have their own dashboard, which they can report in incidents. They can do pre-session checks, and they will be recorded on their personalized dashboard that they can view at any point. Just in terms of security, as this is a question we get asked a lot, obviously, we're very conscious of the security aspects of online use. Each user has a password protected login. We're a GDPR compliant system with encrypted data storage and transfer. You can deactivate users whenever they leave your club. So if you have a user who is off to another club or is leaving the club completely, you simply press one button to deactivate them and they can no longer gain access to the system. There's different access levels according to the different levels of coach. So there's a coach level, there's a group admin level, and then a company admin level. It's your data. As I say, we've come from a sporting background. We know that there's a lot of pressure from outside organizations to buy data or advertise products and services. We don't want to do that. We're not going to transfer any of your data to third parties. This is purely for your club to help you maintain safety and make it a better club for all. We're UK based and we are ICO registered. So the actual costs that we're going to be charging this out for, this has been really heavily subsidized by the RFU and the insurers RSA. So we're glad to say that for clubs that have already got the multi-checker accounts with Proactive using the COVID checker, all we're asking for that full access to the hazards, incidents, pre-session checks is a one-off fee of £10 plus VAT. If you're new to the proactive system, completely new to the proactive system, it still is only £30 plus VAT, and that is a subsidised rate, and that is just for the first 100 clubs. So we're really pushing this to help people get on board with their risk management within clubs. And then after that, again, we're not upping the price heavily. It will only be £50 plus VAT. And the reason for that is that I'm very much of the ethos that health and safety and risk management shouldn't cost the club a lot of money. It shouldn't be a financial burden on clubs, and therefore we want Proactive to be a tool that clubs can easily access without having to think too hard and too long about whether it's worthwhile doing. This really is a system that will help your club manage those incidents, ditch the paper-based resources, and really move you forwards in terms of your risk management solution. As mentioned earlier, Jamie has been using the system with Didcot and has just been basically demolition testing it, making sure that they're happy, as a club, they're happy with how it's been used. And I'll just hand over quickly to Jamie for his thoughts on the system. Thank you.
Cheers, Dom. Yeah, so at a club level, we set up about 3 weeks ago with the system. I took the management on, shared with most of the minis and juniors coaches, and then physios within the seniors squads as well. And the senior director of rugby, for example, set up those accounts. We've probably raised about 8 accident report forms so far. I'm going to be completely honest, it's something that is new for the coaches to use. It's making sure that they're aware of how to use the system. It is so easy to use, so easy to set up. And it's getting the change in place. So the guys, probably the first week that we used it, about half of them did their pre-session checks. Second week, about 3/4, and then last Sunday we were probably at about 90%. So we're getting there slowly but surely. It's a new system, but everybody is giving some really good feedback on the system and how it works. Obviously, it removes all the paper-based accident report forms. It then puts it into a central secure location so we can gain access to them, we can see them there. And it's also, I've actually had feedback from some coaches saying that the resources to the Rugby Safe side of things has really benefited them as well. So it's given them that support there. Like I said, it's really easy. There's I've got the main management panel on my laptop, and then I've also downloaded it onto my phone as well. I've been doing the under 14 sessions, pre-session checks on that system as well. It's nice and easy, and very much like Dom said, not even 2 minutes. And it just gives you that peace of mind that those checks have been done. And then if anything does come up, there's the dynamic risk assessment tool on there as well, where issues can be raised straight away. We've had one of those raised where we had a couple of uneven slabs that was raised straight away due to the heavy rain. It did actually move some of the slabs. So that was raised and fixed very, very quickly, and that's where we then cooperated with our club site, Boundary Park, and they had that fixed within a few days. But the hazard was identified, it was reported. Myself as the Rugby Safe lead, club chairman, was aware of it as well, and then we've also set up the groundsman for the club on the system as well, so he was aware of what was going on when that issue was raised. So yeah, it's such a good system to put in place. As a county, we're pushing for all clubs within Oxfordshire CB to take advantage of this application, and essentially then the ease of use. So if Didcot are going to Oxford Harlequins for an away session and there's an accident there, we're all using the same system, so we know that if we're there, we can use that system to report an incident. Harlequins will be using exactly the same system as well, and we can report any hazards. They can share information with us if they need to as well. So it's a really good system to use. So if I would give anybody advice, take advantage of this system, because it really simplifies the way that we can carry out our accident reports, dynamic risk assessments, and hazard reporting. Okay.
Thank you, Jamie. Alex Thompson just come back in here, but thanks, Jamie, for all that. So we're coming very close to 8 o'clock. We're just coming to the end of our sort of presentation. One thing I do want you to note is it's worth as well around risk assessments and health and safety to speak with your constituent body. So that is like North Midlands Rugby Football Union or Yorkshire Rugby Football Union or Cornwall Rugby Football Union. Have a word with them, because a lot of different CBs are all in different financial situations and different people to support them, but they do have people like Jamie, there to support you. So it's worth seeking support from your constituent body and seeing what help they could offer to your club as well, above and beyond what we've sort of spoke about tonight. So we're just coming to 8 o'clock. We're going to do a Q&A. So if you want to stay on, then please do. If we don't answer the questions in the Q&A for sort of 10 minutes that we sort of stay on for, then we will do a follow-up in the follow-up note when we'll take all of the things that are in the chat away. But I'm going to pass over to Ian now, stop sharing and just do a Q&A. But if you've got to go, because we said we'd be an hour, so the presentation's finished in the hour, then please, head off. If not, if you want to stay for the Q&A, then we will carry on now. I'm going to pass over to Ian to lead us through that.
Okay then, guys, if you've got any further questions, please get them in the chat so we can pick them as we go along. Just one for you, Dom, that I just picked up. Maybe one to look at potentially is from Kevin, just saying, is safe use of scrum machines on pre-session check on the app?
Yeah, so the pre-session check is quite generic. So can you hear me? The pre-session check is quite generic, so it won't have specific machinery or equipment on there. It will simply make the statement, is all equipment safe and ready for use? Obviously, if a coach recognises an issue with the scrum machine, they can record that on the dynamic risk assessment, and that would then obviously get flagged to a higher level at the club.
Cheers, Dom. A question coming from Hayley. How can I delete symptom check entries? Pretty specific, but...
Super, no problem. So the symptom check entries will automatically disappear from the dashboard after 3 weeks. We brought that in line with the sort of track and trace considerations. In terms of deleting them permanently, we can do that for you. You just drop me an email or drop Proactive an email and we can get that sorted for you. Obviously, as soon as the COVID situation is over, which we hope is sooner rather than later, then we won't hold that data on there for any longer than it's needed. So we'll get rid of that as soon as we can, really. But this is your data in effect. So obviously there's certain restrictions in retaining data and retaining things like first aid reports and stuff like that. What we can do is, if you ever leave Proactive, is actually provide you with a file that is yours to take away with all of your data on it. So that's another part of what we can do.
Cheers, Dom. Thanks for that. There was one that came in from Claire earlier. Does it replace or have function for reporting accidents on the AGP, or do you still contact them directly? We just said that, it's a good question. We could potentially link that in maybe, but at the moment it doesn't. If that's correct, Dom.
Yeah, I mean, the instant reporting, when you move through it, if you've got an accident, it will ask you where the accident's occurred, and it also has a question, is this an RFU reportable incident? So if you select yes, that will flag then to your organisation that you've got to do that additional form for the RFU. It doesn't link directly to it, but within the resources section, if you click on that, there is a direct link to that form and that information to help you fill in the RFU specific form as well.
Excellent. I think we've got a question from Kevin. What accidents get reported on AGP? Rachel, do I come to you?
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, so just to clarify on that previous question as well. So if it's an RFU AGP, there's a slightly separate reporting process as well, and that's what I mean. The question Claire asked is a really good one, and it might be something we can have a look to try and link up. But yeah, if it's an RFU AGP, we're trying to collect data around artificial grass surfaces. So that's why we asked for that data. So hopefully that's answered Kevin's question there. It's specifically the RFU owned sites.
Thanks, Rachel. Get your questions in now or forever hold your peace. I think we have the experts on the group have answered most, if not all, of the questions that have been posed.
I've got a question here from Tom Nurse in the chat about the original COVID checker and the new system, asking whether the two will link up. Yep, absolutely. Your existing account will basically be transferred onto the new system. So all you'll see in terms of the COVID checker is that the colouring will change, the branding will change on it, and then you'll have full access to the other aspects of the system. So yeah, no problem at all with that.
And one from Sarah here. Does anyone use a sideline concussion assessment tool? And would that be included in Proactive? One for you, Dom.
It's not included in Proactive at the moment, but I'm kind of open to all suggestions really. The system's quite, well, it's very adaptable. It's modular based. So each of those instant reporting, hazard reporting, pre-session check is a separate module. So, you know, if there is feedback from clubs to the RFU that says we'd also like to have it reported. I noticed someone put about safeguarding, and you know, if there's that sort of sideline check, that could be incorporated in going forwards, but that would be something that would obviously be reliant on sort of CBs putting pressure on the RFU to put it in there, and for it to be useful for you guys to use. You know, the system's designed to be as easy as possible and to bring a lot of things together in one place that are often quite sort of all over the place or held in one central location that only perhaps one person or two people see throughout the year. So yeah, we're open to adapt the system as much as we can. Obviously we've made it would be specific for this, for the Rugby Union site, and taken on board obviously adaptations to the question sets from the team at the RFU, and we'll continue to do that, and that's been the case from the start. So yeah.
Yeah, and good point from Tom Nurse there. Obviously, in the community game, recognise and remove for concussion. Sarah Watmore's come in. Currently, she uses a calendar to monitor graduated return to play stages. Can the app do this? Dom, I'll let you answer.
Not at the moment, but again, we've looked at calendarizing certain aspects of reports and injury reports and stuff like that. So again, it's really based on demand. If there's a demand to do it and to have it included within the system, then we will look at that. We're kind of guided by you guys really and your use of it over the next sort of 6 months. If it's taken on board on a big scale and clubs are really enjoying and using it, or not enjoying using it, that's probably the wrong phrase, but actively using it at all levels, and there's that sort of feedback and demand for additional aspects to it, then we will look at anything that you want putting in there really, because the more useful it is to clubs, the more likely you are to keep using it and to also get your coaches and your club staff to interact with it. And that's going back to what Jamie said in terms of usage. It really is, these systems are only as good as the people who use them. So if your club signs up but doesn't then actively promote the use of it, then it won't work. You really need to push your coaches and staff to use a system that they sign up to. And that's why it's designed to be as easy as possible. It's designed from the coach up rather than the opposite way around, to make sure that coaches aren't there isn't an overbearing force on them to complete all these checks and all these different forms that are difficult to complete or don't guide them on how to complete them effectively.
Great.
Ian, sorry,
yeah,
can I just want to clarify quickly, because there's a bit, I don't want people to get confused. So there is what we call the pocket concussion tool, and that's basically a checklist that, you know, what Don was saying there, that we could potentially in the future add to the proactive app, that just basically provides the list of potential of observable signs and symptoms that someone might see if someone has a suspected concussion. That's different to what Tom's kind of flagged there as the HIA. He's completely right. In the HIA, a head injury assessment only happens at the top level in the Premiership and above. So just to clarify, they are two different things, and the concussion tool can be used and is useful across the community game.
Thanks for that, Rachel. Andy, do you want to come in?
Yeah, if I can just come in on one point, because I saw a question as well about whether the proactive app is linked to the insurance as well. At the moment, it isn't, but it's something that we're definitely, I think, going to look at from a future development point of view. But one of the things that it is useful for is if you're completing the incident reporting on the app, you're likely to do it at a much quicker than you would do necessarily if you were doing it on paper afterwards. And that's really, really helpful information when you're advising the insurers about what's happened, just because you're getting really up-to-date information and really accurate information about what the injury is and what's happened around the details. So it's not directly connected yet, but it does give you really good information for the reporting of things to insurers as well.
Thanks, Andy. Really good. And I think that's the last of the questions. Time for one more. Will the upgrade be seen on the current COVID checker? I can't see it on there now. One for you, Dom.
Yeah, no, from tomorrow, you'll be able to use the link that's on the presentation that was on this evening. That is a new sign-up link. And when you click on that, it will ask you whether you're currently using the system, and it will obviously direct you for payment based on your answer to that question. And then that will allow me to switch you over onto the full accounts, which will give you access to all the different aspects of it. And obviously, as you'll be accustomed, if you've signed up to multi-checker, you'll get some additional information from me regarding a user guide and all those sort of things that are useful to get you started. So use the link in the presentation. I will send it out to all of those clubs that have got the COVID-19 checker multi-account tomorrow or Monday as a reminder. Obviously, just also a reminder that I saw earlier, there's a Warwickshire, I think, which is great, looking to get all of their clubs on it. And if Oxford should also get all of their clubs on it, and there's a bit of a race between them, we might hit that 100 pretty quickly. So I would say get that email into me, get that sign up form done, and you will be on that list of the first 100. Obviously, you know, we haven't upped the price heavily after that point, but, you know, you guys who are on here tonight are the people who are most engaged in the process, I guess, at this point. So it'd be good to have you on board early on.
Thanks, Dom, and thanks everyone for your contributions tonight. I'll just pass back to Alex to close the session, but thank you for all your time.
Thanks very much, and thanks for everyone joining us. So to summarise that, you know, obviously we need to make sure that we make our rugby clubs safe on the field, off the field, and hopefully you can see there we've got some great solutions there to help you do that. The free online risk assessment tool to do your annual risk assessment with Howden. That will be ready very shortly, in about a week or so, and we will follow up with that information for you. We've got the Rugby Safe, and then a variety of those things are being updated at the moment, but it's worth to keep looking at that link that we shared with you, and we'll share that link with you to keep looking back on it. And we've got the proactive system with a very clear offer there for the first 100. So get in, you know, ready for that proactive stuff, ready for tomorrow. And also just check in with your constituent body, because, you know, a variety of them are really willing to support this. You can see from Jamie being on here tonight, Oxfordshire, Warwickshire have said they're going to support it as well. So, you know, there's worth speaking with your constituent body, so they might be able to help you further. And let's make, you know, our rugby clubs safer, to make them a really enjoyable environment. But I thank you very much for joining us. I thank every single one of the panelists for a great presentations tonight. We hope you found it useful, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you very much, and have a good evening.